All right, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking again a little bit more about Reilly. We're going to be doing a Reilly head in the 3/4 view. Now the thing about Reilly's method is, first off, if you've watched any videos on Reilly, he didn't leave us any notes or the way he was thinking about the way he was teaching heads, and so everything that we have has come down from notes that his students made while they were taking his classes. So this is one that you'll see of the classic Reilly head front view, developed from the circle and all that. We're going to impose these rhythms upon a 3/4 view. Now I'm going to simplify some of the Reilly. I don't normally put now on all these different lines. Again, this is supposed to match up with the tear duct. This over here is supposed to be the end of the tear duct. And these are planes of the head. And this is really great if you're drawing the Asaro head. The Asaro head was based on Reilly's rhythms. And it's a three-dimensional sculpture where you're dealing with planes and to try to get the feel for a three-dimensional head using Reilly. We're going to be doing something similar, but there's some of these rhythms I'm not going to break down the little V here, the rounded V in this arch, and a couple things. I don't use the circles as much, except as placeholders. So there's some of these things I don't necessarily do. There's other things that I will do. But we're going to go ahead, and this is our basic Reilly head. And the biggest thing we want to be thinking about is that when we go into 3/4, all these circles are going to be ellipses of some sort. And how wide or skinny you make those ellipses in perspective is going to change the perspective of the head. Or if someone has a thinner head or a wider head and things like that. So what we're going to be doing in this class is again going to be doing sort of a 3/4 view. These are just some tear sheets that we did, or that I did. And this is mostly for the features, though these are more registration marks because I wanted to be able to line them up with what was underneath. So this is just some of the remnants of Reilly, but this is really where I'm keeping the drawing of the nose, the mouth, the eyes, the eyebrows. We're going to have 3 stages in the class. This will be the last stage, of course, or the 3rd stage. This will be the 2nd stage where we develop the head and we're putting on those Reilly rhythms. Here's that. The circles have now become ellipses. Circle for the frontalis or the forehead. Circle for, that goes around the jowl and the outside towards the, around you almost say the midpoint of the mandible, and then the smaller one that's supposed to encapsulate the mouth and also show the smile lines. Whenever we do this, always remember that this is just a guide. So I've broken out a little bit with the corners of the mouth, and that's mostly because this should probably be a little bit wider. This ellipse is a little bit too squished, but that's okay. I can break outside it, no big deal. So this will be our 2nd stage, and we're going to come here. I guess I'm doing this backwards. This is the 1st stage where we're going to develop and create the basic head shape. Now, again, we could use these Reilly rhythms on top of the Loomis head too. The only difference at this point between Loomis and Reilly is basically this right here, our little ellipse. Reilly, it was basically an 1/8 of the way up here and an 1/8 of the way up there, as opposed to the Loomis, which is 1/6 and 1/6, so that these widths together were 1/3 and this width was 2/3. That's the only thing. When you make it 1/8, it just lengthens the head a bit. So the only difference between Reilly and Loomis is a lot of times Loomis heads seem like they're rounder heads, unless you trim in. You can trim in, of course. But you can also if you make it longer, you're going to lengthen the head. If you make it shorter, you're going to make the head more round. In terms of this ellipse right here as it closes this way. So we're going to get the basic head shape, define the planes, define a center line. We're not going to go into it like we did with my other videos where we talk about placing very formally the center line. But we're going to get to this head shape, and then on top of it, so this is going to be step 1. And then over the top of this, step 2, this is going old school with these old, this is tracing paper. Some people used to call it onion skin, almost like layers in Photoshop, but we're going low tech with this. But again, you lay the Reilly rhythms on top of that basic head shape. And then on top of the Reilly rhythms, we develop our features. And with this, you know, because I took out the little white sheets, we can see all the way, well, we can see through to the second layer and even a little bit to the third layer. And so we can see how the Reilly rhythms and, you know, are still under there, the basic head stuff, the basic box all the way down to that first layer. We're going to develop this head, okay? So again, we're going to get started with this, and we'll start with defining, again, our basic head shape from the sphere. So this will be our step 1. So we're going to go ahead and get started on that. All right, so we'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. So we're going to get started on our Loomis head. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the circle that we're going to modify for this head. Okay. Now I'm just using a charcoal pencil. The charcoal pencil that I'm using here is the Pierre Noir 1710. You hear a lot about this. I like that it shows up, is the reason I use it. It shows up really well when we are filming. And so many times people will be like, I can't see your line, it's not dark enough. So instead of doing this in pencil or something like that, we're going to use the Pierre Noir. Now, I'm drawing this flat on a flat table. You would never ever want to draw like this. And the only reason I do it like this is so there's no distortion on the drawing. Most times when people are drawing, they're drawing it with proper technique, and they're sitting at a drafting table or at an easel or something like that, which is great, but it's not great for getting the camera angle right, because you always get distortion because you're shooting it from the right or the left. And so this is a way where we can have absolutely straight down, no distortion. You can see a little better what I'm doing. So we've got our circle, and from our circle we're then going to cut this with our ellipse like so. And so went ahead and we've cut off the side of that head. Okay. Now once we've got this, we're going to decide and cut the ellipse in half. So this is supposed to be in the middle of that ellipse. This is just a basic head construction. If you don't or are not familiar with this, go back and watch my Loomis videos. It'll show you this basic construction, but we're just going through the basic motions. Now, with this vertical, these are all the vertical lines are going to be, we're thinking of the head in a box. All those vertical lines are going to be truly parallel for the moment, because we're making a box. Basically, we're making a 2-point perspective box for those people that know their perspective terminology. And so these are our verticals, and our verticals will stay truly parallel unless we're dealing with 3-point perspective, which we are not. Okay, so there's our 3 lines, and they're supposed to be truly vertical. They're not perfect, but they're close enough. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go through the middle of this line or thereabouts, and through the middle. Now this person's head, their ear, now usually you'll hear the top of the ear, and the top of the ear is always a little bit lower than the eye. So Well, what I'm trying to do with this is we're actually going to make it like it's a 45-45, in other words, about the same angle on this side of the box as it is on this side of the box. So it would be what's called a 45-45 two-point perspective box. If you don't know about perspective, I've got videos on 1- and 2-point perspective boxes. Just get to know them. It's not that big a deal. Okay, so I cut through the middle, and these are going, they're not the exact same. This is going down a little bit quicker. This is a little bit softer, so we're seeing more of this side than that side. But this is going to be the brow line, okay? So we're going to be using the same landmarks that we do with Loomis. So we're going to go ahead, and these are supposed to be parallel, and we're going to keep these very sharp angles for right now. You'll see some people will begin to round the lines already. Well, a lot of beginners and even intermediate and sometimes even advanced artists won't bank the curve. And so remember, we're trying to show that there is, with this perspective and using the box, we're trying to say there's a definite right side, there's a definite left side. It's not ambiguous. As I get more into this, well, then I could round that off. But for right now, we really want to think of this being the corner. This is the corner of our box. All right, so again, this is just that corner of our box. And then it goes down to the right, and it goes down to the left. Okay, and so we're also going to come over here, and we're going to go, all right, there's a line that goes that way, and then there is a line that goes that way. Okay. Now, depending on your person, normally these, ideally, these are equal thirds. Okay. But there are some people that have a stronger jaw, so the jaw will be a little longer. Some people have a shorter forehead. Some people. So if you actually start measuring these are pretty close, but the forehead's a little shorter. I did that on purpose. I was, playing with the proportions a little bit. But this is only shorter by a little bit, so it's not a huge deal. But I just want to point that out. This is malleable. It's not written in stone. They don't always have to be equal. It depends on the person's features. Some people have shorter noses, longer jaws. Some people have longer foreheads and shorter, brow to nose. So get a feel for that. So now what we're going to do from here is we're going to take this and we're going to bring this down. Now again, I made this a little longer. I'm going to make it a little longer. I've already drawn this, so this is just a little longer through the jaw, to the chin. But if I wanted to do my equal third, I could have stopped it, right about there, which is truly equal, and then this is just a little bit longer. So again, I'm just playing a little bit with a little bit of a game. But again, I could have made it the exact, brought this exactly down, and gone ahead and put my mark right there. But instead, I'm going to use it down here. And again, all these lines here should be parallel or parallel-like. If I pretty close to it. If I was worried about them not being parallel, I could get my drafting triangle out, and I could go ahead and make sure that they are, pretty close to being as parallel as possible. So this will be the bottom of the jaw. Now the other thing we have to remember at this point is that the head is wider at the top and comes down at an angle towards the bottom to the chin. And so I'm going to change a line through there, and this is to show that this is going to be getting wider as it comes up and coming in a bit as it comes down through that jaw. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring this over. Okay. Then I'm going to come off of here and come down to the chin. Through there. Now I want to already be thinking of where's the halfway point, because this should be where it turns for the jaw should not be above the halfway point of this lower piece. This right here is the chin. This right here is the nose. Okay, so halfway between the nose and the chin, we want to make sure, and it's just about there. It's right. It's just maybe a little above it, but you don't want to go. If I did it up here, that'd be breaking the jaw. So we want it just about around that halfway point. If some people's jaws are more square, it might be down further, but it can't be above the halfway mark, because then we're breaking the jaw. That's not the way the architecture of the head works. So we want to keep that in mind. So now we've got the chin in there. Some people will call this boxy shape the shield, you know, because you have the rounder part and then you have the more square part. So we can then bring this down and connect this and bring this into the neck. Okay. So now, a lot of times for this neck, you'll bring it down from about the corner of the eye. Now, he's supposedly 3/4, and there might be a little bit too much curve, but there's usually going to be a natural curve caused because you have the head coming down here, and then it hits the neck, and then you get a little bit of the trapezius coming out a little bit. And so a lot of times you'll get a little bit of that curvature through there. I'm just going to match the curve down here, and I'm thinking of it coming from up here, off the brow, kind of at the corner of the eye, and bringing it down. So I'm just trying to kind of follow that arc and bring it down from about the corner of the eye, thereabouts. You know, if you're drawing somebody, you can check that. Where's this dropping down from? If I'm making this up, however, if I'm doing a, you know, comic book character or an anime character or what have you, well, then I'm going to look for where does this neck come down. Of course, if this was animated, this neck would be way too thick, and even as it is, it might be a little on the thick side. I might bring this in just a little bit. It's looking either that, or this is, you know, someone who's an athlete, weightlifter or something like that. Not a huge weightlifter. I mean, this guy isn't super beefy, but he just has a thicker neck. This is coming down. This is where you're going to have the neck. This is gonna come down here. This will be the throat, and we're not going to get into all the muscles, but you'd have the trapezius connection here, and not the trapezius, pardon me, the sternomastoid. This would be the trapezius muscle behind, coming down here, hitting the clavicle, banking the curve. So we're just going to indicate some of this musculature. Again, we got a little bit of the trapezius back muscle coming down here. Then we hit the clavicle, bank that curve, and we come up to the notch right here where the clavicles are on top of the manubrium, I believe is the name of that particular bone, the top of the sternum, which I believe is the manubrium. But we're not going to worry a ton about that. So we've got just our basic head shape that we've already put together here. Now, for Reilly, I need something else. I need to have the center line. Well, remember, if I need the center line, what I would do is I would take the brow to the nose, and what would we do? We'd use X marks the spot. So I come down here with X marks the spot, corner to corner, corner to corner. If you guys haven't watched the video on the armature of the rectangle, I would encourage you to watch it, because you can do all kinds of great stuff with that. So I've got X marks the spot, and this right here is about the middle of that plane. And if you saw the whole thing on finding the center line, this would actually come up a little bit, this would come down, we would echo this curve and come through there, and what we're going to end up with, and again I have a video on the center line, I've got 3 of them. So if you don't know how to find the center line, look for finding the center line with Loomis or Reilly, and those are like, of the last 12 videos I've done, they're in there, last 10 to 12. But we'd actually find the center line, and that's just because it projects outward. So anyways, that's what we're going to do there. Now, for someone who's like, hey, here's the middle, and this, I actually lifted this line. This line was originally too small, and I lifted it up. And I might have to play a little bit with the way this comes up and over and wraps just a tiny bit. But it's close enough. We've got a pretty good center line. So I'm not going to lose any sleep on it. The next thing we would do is we actually divide this into quarters and halves. So we would divide this into quarters for the top. This right here is the hairline. We'll just put hair and LN for line. Thank you for putting up with my bad penmanship. So we've got the hairline, the brow, the nose. So I'm going to divide this into fourths. So we have the half point, the 3/4, 1/4. Well, this one we're going to divide this into thirds. Okay. And I can eyeball that. I can do, I can find my thirds that way. If I want to be a little bit more formal with it, I could take, I need thirds down here too. So I could come over here and I could use armature of a rectangle. So again, that armature is really great because, again, I could very quickly put that there. And whenever we do X marks the spot, we then come through the X. Actually, that's supposed to be parallel to this line, so. Not quite parallel. There we go. It's better. And then we can come through there to divide that about in half. And then what can we do, or what do we do? We're going to come from the middle down to that corner. Where that hits the main diagonal, this right here, that's our third. And so I can check that, but what I would do is I'd bring that over, just scoot it over onto the center line, trying to make sure that this line here is parallel to that line there. And then I'm going to measure it with my thumb. See how close I was? Because it got a little loose through here. Okay, so I think it's a little high. So we'll just drop it a bit. Drop that to there, bring that there, bring that there, that's pretty good. So we'll come over here. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just do it this way. I was going to drop it from the top, but I'll drop it right here. That right there should be thirds. So again, 1, 2, and 3. It's a little long through the nose, but that's all right. I'll just move it slightly there. Move this one slightly there. So again, when we're doing this, it's going to give us in the ballpark. And if I left that there without moving it, it probably would have been fine. Because I was just barely, I'm about 3/30 seconds, so just under 1/8 of an inch. Most people are not going to catch that. But I went ahead and I went ahead and corrected it. So again, we've got the basic head shape now. We've got our center line. We of course have over here, which is again the side of the head, all that good stuff. We have the basics of the neck. Where do we go from here? Well, what we would do with our Reilly head is usually where I'd start is we're going to start at the 1/3 mark, and we're going to come all the way up onto the hairline. So this is, people call this is the frontalis part of the skull that we are defining here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and define again that frontalis, meaning the frontal part of the skull. Some people refer to it as the frontal arch. There's different names for it, but basically this is the frontmost part of the forehead. We're then, and again, we divided this into fourths, this into thirds, that into thirds. So again, thirds, thirds, and fourths. I don't normally use the fourths as much, but there are some people that do, so I'll just have you divide that into fourths, even though I don't use those fourths very often. Again, we're going to simplify Reilly a little bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here with the some people will call these the sunglasses arch that we're going to do here. And what we're doing is we're trying to follow the brow. The actual top of the brow dips down a little bit between the eyebrows. So this over here is the eyebrow arcing up and above the brow line. This is actually part of this is part of that keystone shape. I believe it's all of a sudden I'm spacing on my vocabulary, but I believe it's the glabella. So it arcs down a little bit, the eyebrows arc up a little bit, the eyebrows are above the brow. Okay, so this is going to give you what kind of looks like an angry eyebrow line or something, but it's to get the eyebrows. And a lot of times people will look for this arch for where it pulls up through and over. Not everyone, but so again, Reilly didn't write stuff down, and so a lot of this is really personal where people and how they use it, because of the fact that if you look at his students, they'll have a little bit different stuff, the way they took notes and things. So right now we're going to just start off with our little flowing line. Then we're going to go ahead and down at the chin, we're going to go ahead and put in an ellipse to begin to define the chin. Okay. Then we're going to put in the next ellipse, which is going to be, again, where the smile line is. And what we do is we go from 1/3 up. I started at the wrong place. That's 2/3. That's not right. We go 1/3 up and 1/3 up there. So this is the nose line. This is 1/3, 1/3 above the nose line, 1/3 above the chin line. And we're going to go ahead and create the again, some people will call this the muzzle, and that's certainly going to be part of it. But and this is also, this is part of where the skull begins to project out through the tooth cylinder and the muzzle. And so, but it also gives us through the around through the top of the around to the top of the nose thereabouts. So there's that circle. Now the wider circle goes through the bottom here and 1/3 from the top there. This right here is going to be going through the wider ellipse that's going to have the jowl, and it's going to come over here and it's going to connect through here to the chin. So this is that wider arc through there for again, that's going to come around and through that jowl. That's what that is. So we've got that right there. Okay. As far as that goes. Now, some people will put between those two, they'll put a circle that's supposed to indicate the entire eyeball. Okay. And you could certainly do that. The only thing is, because we've got a 3/4 view, the head is turning, and as the head turns, these get closer because of the fact that it's a 3/4. So I don't normally use these little eyeballs when I'm doing a 3/4, because it kind of starts to mess with my mind a little bit, because these start to get closer. The more the head turns, the more these get closer. And you're like, well, what about the eye spaces? And it starts to kind of weird me out a little bit. And so I don't do these as much. But you can put the little circles in there for the eyes. It's just they also, they're supposed to just barely touch that arc. And mine are kind of, this is going into this one, into that one. This one goes into this one here, but touches there. So again, I don't use the circles as much. I'll use a different method. I'll use these just to kind of think about the eye, but I'm not going to lose sleep over them either. I'm actually going to define the bottom part of the ocular cavity. And if we cut this in half, thereabouts, so this is in the halfway point that I'm talking about, is between the nose and the brow. If we cut that in half, that should, right about there, should be the bottom of the ocular cavity. That also tells me my eyeballs are a little low. So I can use certain different landmarks. Now also, this right here is supposed to touch the side of the head, right? And so as you're drawing this, though, again, we're using it as, so this is supposed to touch the outside of the ocular cavity, is right against where this is supposed to come. But if you're like, I think this needs to project out, remember, this was just a starting point. This will still be fine. And again, I can bring this over. And then this would come back, and then this would jut out around the cheek. This is something that's very important. It comes around the ocular cavity and in, and then the ocular cavity begins to project out as it picks up the cheek, and you come in through there. Okay, so we're starting to describe a little bit more of the head. Now, what we're going to do from here is we're going to start to just rough in some certain shapes. Now, we're going to go ahead and put on the rest of the glabella. So the glabella, again, is this little keystone shape, as it's called, and it transitions the nose onto the forehead. And it's very, very important. And what we're going to do is we're going to come through this, and we're going to begin to build the nose. So I'm going to just arc this a little bit. And then we're going to come out. Now the nose projects outward. And the other thing we should know about this nose line, the nose line, this is for around the ball of the nose. The septum, where the nose actually connects, is just a little bit below there. So it's going to come down a little bit for the septum. And that's between the nostrils, that little piece that divides the nostrils. The other thing we have to remember is that we have the muzzle, in other words, the mouth, comes off the center line because the mouth is in front of the forehead. And if you look in profile, you can see very clearly that the mouth, again, is in front of the forehead. So we're going to need this to have an arc that comes out because of the teeth and then around the chin. Okay, so this is actually in front of that center line because we have a projection of the muzzle and we have a projection of the chin. The chin is still in front of the forehead. So that center line is great, but we're going to build off the center line as well because this is projecting, this piece down here. Now, what we're going to do from here is, again, we're going to bring this little, we're going to go ahead and bring this little nose piece out here, and then we're going to bring it in. So I'm making like a little, what looks to be like a little triangle on here. Now I could round this out, and that's what many people do. We could actually kind of back engineer this, but you could go ahead and keep it, angular in the beginning, or it actually at some point is going to have to start to get rounded off because that becomes the ball of the nose. So this nose is projecting outward, right? This nose is coming out a little bit and projecting out. Okay, and then what does the nose do? It also comes back in onto the face. And so we're going to go ahead and connect to this. This will be where the septum touches the head. This over here, we're going to soften that because the middle of the septum, I think, should move over slightly. There we go. And then again, we're going to go ahead and curve this around because that's too straight. So we're going to start putting the nose on, obviously. And the septum's going to turn and it's going to come up. You get sort of like this little V. And this is going to come down onto the nostril. Okay. So this right here. And I think that we've got the bridge a little wide. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this in a little bit for the bridge of that nose. All right. So this is the septum, the underneath side of the ball, and the wing of the nose all merged into one right now. We haven't done any nostrils yet. We're just going to put that as a placeholder. Now on the opposite side, we might, because of how it's turned, we're going to see a little bit of that far nostril, but not nostril, but the wing, but not much. So I'm going to put that in, put this in, bring that there. This comes over here. And this right here that we've drawn is essentially all the underside of the nose, where the nostrils are going to go and everything like that. Okay, and if we want to, we'd say, and we could take the other side of this Philtrum. A lot of times you'll see on the Reilly they'll always have this very distinct little V, and that is for the septum. This is a little wide for the septum, but it's got the septum and the ball kind of merged. The ball will actually round through there just a little bit, and then the septum. But anyways, this will be a starting point in the basic idea of the nose. Now another thing that we need from the glabella is there's one more little ellipse, and what this ellipse is, and this is really important because this used to confuse me when I draw. And I'd see this and I'd go, what am I seeing? So it's easy to understand that the nose has to have the side, and so this is the side of the nose coming around and then slamming into this. This is the wing. So it's easy to understand that that's going on, but what you'll get with this, that again, I would see it, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was seeing, is that because this is basically a pyramid, this nose, we'll see just a little bit of the other side of this as it's angling away from us because it's a pyramid. We see just a little bit of this that's going to come in front of that eye a little bit, and the tear duct especially. That's very important. So this is the side here, right? That's the side right there. This is the underside right here. Okay, the underside of the nose. We of course have the ocular cavities that are also going to be in shadow. That's right there. Now I'm just putting a tone here so we understand kind of what we've done so far. And it just is easier many times, especially if you're, a beginning portrait artist. Sometimes we get lost in the detail, but if we can put just a slight tone to show the different shapes, it'll make much more sense. The next thing we're going to use is, just depending on who you are. So we're going to put the ear on. So remember how this right here is supposed to be the side of the head, because the head gets thinner as it comes down. And in actuality, it wouldn't be a straight line either. This would be rounded, right? Because the head is round. This would be slightly rounded. Now, it wouldn't be completely round like a ball, but it would be more round than what we've got here. So again, a lot of these lines are going to get a little bit of curve at some point. But we're going to put the ear on here, okay? Now, the ear is usually between the brow line and the nose line, okay? So there's our ear right there. So, and the ear is, of course, going to be on the left side of the face, and this is the front side of the face on the right. And the great thing about Reilly is it's going to give us some of these front planes versus side planes. This right here, the side plane on the top of the head, is right off the temple as it comes up onto the top part of the ocular cavity, where it's still a little bit of the temple. You'll see where it comes up and then it goes, that's the side of the head wrapping around. So that's important, that this right here, again, is the side of the head. Now as we come down through the head, this is where the architecture down here gets a little bit more complicated. And so we're going to start to define some other areas. One is that you'll come from the ear and bring an arc down until it merges with this one and goes down here and then it merges with that. So, you know, it comes down and it hits this and goes around there. All right. The next one's a little more strange. When you do it the first time, usually you'll take the halfway mark through here, and you'll bring a line up. Now, usually, sometimes I'll put the lips and then do this from the lips. You don't have to have the lips there, and then you'll bring this up to the ear as well. However, I always find that this is always a bit. I always find that to be a little bit high. So what I usually do is I'll actually bring it to where the ear cuff is. And it doesn't make a huge difference, but I don't think it should be, you know, again, this is my own personal idea, but I don't think this should be touching, you know, because this is what this is supposed to be, this is supposed to be where does the top part of the chin start to come out, or not the chin, pardon me, the cheek, not the chin, but the cheek. And so again, I'm just bringing it to the cuff, which is still the top portion of the ear, but again, this just arcs back, and it's going to come down, and it goes into the corner of the mouth. I haven't drawn the mouth yet, obviously, but I already know where I'm putting it, so I put that there. We should be good. And if we wanted to, we could go over here and say, all right, well, let's go ahead and, again, bring this down here and around from the corner of the mouth again. So, at the corner of the mouth right there, thereabouts, it's going to arc upward through the nose and come out through the cheek right there. So now we've got, you know, this rhythm here, this rhythm here, this rhythm here, that rhythm there, this rhythm here. All right, and then of course we have the mandible ellipse that we've got right through there. Okay. All right. The other one that sometimes people will bring is they'll bring through here the circle from the original, you know, the original circle that we developed the head from. Depending on how your head's turned and how you developed this. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get there's a portion of the cheek. This is too low. If we're actually trying to get that arc, it should actually be somewhere around there. But so usually, sometimes in 3/4, they'll fudge this, because again, this is supposed to be what we're looking for. Is certain rhythms. You might be like, well, that's supposed to be the cheek. Well, that's too far down. This could totally be somebody's head. But you may have to lift that light, because it's just going to, like, where's the cheek? Well, it's not here. It's really actually going to be closer to there. But that's the idea, is that you can, and you might say, well, why do we even need that? Well, where the cheek opens up, ever heard of the hollow of the cheek? Hollow of the cheek would be right there. You know, that's where the cheek stops, and it hasn't quite hit the muscle, and it causes many people, especially as they age, a little bit of a slight indentation there, and if you get older, it will be more pronounced. But I could go ahead and use this, and again, you could then use this to kind of indicate, hey, there's a cheek. Cheek comes out and around, and then it comes down here into the jaw, and all this good stuff. All right. Now, we can go ahead and put some more arcs on that are pretty important. Another one that is really nice to have is there's an arc that arcs up like so. About now the quarter point for me is always a little bit low. Some people will use the quarter mark. I actually try to bring it up to the first third. That's still a little bit low to be the third. That's almost like 1/5. That's closer to the third. So again, but that arc there is for the brow. And it's for the muscle that attaches to the head. So this right here again is, or that, you know, again, where the brow attaches. And this is the one where I'm like, yeah, and he's got a little sort of rounded V there. I don't normally do that, but if you're drawing like, you know, a cartoon character or Wolverine or somebody like that, or, you know, whoever, some sort of superhero that's being all brooding or whatever, you would, you know, bring the muscle through there, you know, and all this good stuff. And so it becomes, you know, much more important if you're doing something like that. Again, we can use this for stylization, but, or if we're drawing somebody that has, again, is a little older and has, you know, a little more pronounced furrow there, well, that's fine. Put it in. You know, don't be bashful. So again, this is where the side of the head starts. And so let's talk more about this, the front side, because I talked about the front versus the side, right? Well, it gets a little more complicated here. So this is the front of that ocular cavity. The ocular cavity comes here. It then hits that cheek and it pulls it out. And then this comes around and it goes, so actually you could probably open up just a slight bit more. But pretty much what we're going to end up with is that the side of the head including the ear, this is the side of the head, so it comes around the ocular cavity. Once again, it comes around, comes down, ocular cavity, kicks out over the cheek, and usually that will swell out. Again, this is just looking for a rhythm. If we actually look at the cheek, you're probably going to have it actually come out the opposite direction a little bit, have it come down and hit into here, and then come down and around. Okay, that's pretty important. Again, to know this, you know, the side of the head versus the front of the head. All this over here is on the front, all this over here is on the side. All right. So let's go ahead and put in an indication of the mouth. Now we can also do the eyes. We've kind of blown this out a little bit, but usually the eye line is halfway down, right? So if I took this and I said, well, if that's the eye line, is that halfway on my person? Now sometimes people can be above the halfway mark. Seems like that's a little bit, just a little strong. So we'll drop it just a little lower, okay? And so we'll take this right there and we'll take that to there, and that's pretty close. All right, so the eye line, this is the eye line, and it should be in line with these others. It should have the same angle. Now to help us draw the eyes more symmetrically, what we're going to do is you can bring an arc up to here. Now I'm going to, if this person's head is turned this way, I know I'm going to be seeing very little of that ocular cavity, so I'm going to make a mark right there. There's different ways of finding the eyes. Some people will draw this whole thing and have you kind of carve into it and guesstimate based on the nose and some other, like what's the nose and how wide is this then, and I do it a little differently. I'm going to be like, okay, I think I'm going to see at least this much of the side, because again, this is, you know, in perspective, we're going to see much more of this than this because it's going away from us, it's turning the corner. And let's say I did the nose. Let's say we tried that. We'll bring that up. And I can say, all right, well, that's the corner there, and that's the corner there, and this should be about half of that distance. Oh, it's a little bit more than half. So we'll bring this out just a little bit more, and then we'll check this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this distance to develop the rest of the eyes. Now the other way to do this is to mark this point and divide it into three equal parts, and then you have to open this one up and shrink that one down and shrink that one down the most. You could use line divides a line, but then again you might have to fiddle with it a little bit. But let's go ahead and try this. So if it was the same distance, and I could even check this here to see how, now we're seeing the side of the nose, so we're going to see a little bit more. So the eye space will always, the nose will always be wider a little bit. This person doesn't have a small nose by any stretch of the imagination, as far as that goes. But it's close enough that you can go, I can go, yeah, that feels like that could definitely be a nose. That means that this has to be at least be right there. In other words, the tear duct is going to be closed by this little bit of swelling. Remember, this is that little bit of the right side of the nose. This is going, now this would be blown out in light most likely, or in shadow, just depending on how this is lit or something like that. But with this being the same, this would be, now this is really, really small. And of the two, this is a little bit wider. Now again, where we would see more width because we're seeing the 3/4 view of the nose. It gets wider, and in terms of its relationship, because we're seeing both the front side and the side of that nose. But this will be about where the eye is, and I'm going to check this space here against that space there. And it looks like it's just beyond the 2/3 mark. That'll be fine. This is this is a third smaller than this. Not quite, it's actually 1/5 smaller than that. But what people will do is they'll take an arc, okay, so they'll take an arc from one side to the other, okay. This is for the symmetry part of this. And so they'll take an arc from here. Again, these are just these are help lines. You don't have to use the exact lines. Now I'm going to give a little bit in. I'm going to come in from there because of the tear duct, and then you come out here to the end of the eyebrow, and you do with the same thing here. You come here to about the end of that eyebrow, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the lift of the eye to be symmetrical, and then this would round out a little bit through there. And of course we'd have the tear duct and we'd start to develop the eye. But this is how you would develop the eye. You could then also do one right to left, a little arc through here. You could then do the top of the eyebrow by going to that brow there, coming down from this one here, and from the front of the eyebrow, coming down from there, from this part of the eyebrow, coming down there. Do the same thing here, from the front of the eyebrow, come through there. From this, come down through there. So again, just to check with symmetry, that would then go in and draw the eye, because obviously what I'm looking for is how much do I have left over here, because there has to be a certain amount of space between the eyelid and the eyebrow. There's an amount of space that has to be there, and that's what I'm checking. And once I check and I go, yeah, that's perfect, or pretty close, well then I could go ahead and put, the eyebrow on here, So we're trying to, some people call it sneaking up on it, but we're trying to make sure that we have enough for the lid, and then how much of this is actually in light. Make these they're a little lighter. They catch, it's a fat pad that, as the skin comes up and around the ocular cavity here, this point is the lightest part. So, and again, it's just to help us feel our way through the proportion of those features. Eyebrow here, and so forth and so on. So again, these are just roughed in, and we're going to go ahead and get in here with the mouth. Now with the mouth, I've kind of lost this. I need to double check where my halfway mark is. You might say, I thought we were doing thirds. What does the halfway mark have to do with anything? Well, the halfway mark is where the bottom of the lip goes. The reason we divide into thirds is because usually the philtrum stops 1/3 of the way down. And so if we took this and took that and we took this, we're going to try to lift this just a bit. But again, then this is projecting out. Remember, this is projecting out. Well, then we're going to go ahead and project out, follow that to then create that little tie shape called the philtrum. Okay, so we've got this little tie shape that we call the philtrum, and then from there we're actually going to develop the mouth. Okay, so this is actually the space between the mouth. Now the line between the lips, I should say, is what this is right through here, right? And then we'd say, all right, well, if that's that. And right now, that's just a basic, there's going to be foreshorten on this side. It's going to foreshorten on this side. It's going to be longer on this side than that side. This will foreshorten more. This is, it's turning too, but then we're going to have the nodule of the lip through there, the nodule, little bean shape that hits through there. And then we're going to have the bottom of the lip is going to be at that halfway point. And we have roughed in our basic features. Now this is what we want to, this is just to remind us, hey, we have a chin. And in fact, if we wanted to modify our line for drawing the lips, we actually bring this back, because that's a flat lip, and it tucks back. And then it hits the bottom lip and it projects out. And then it hits here and it projects back again. And then it comes up and over the chin and goes under the face, right? So we want to be thinking of the contours. And people will talk about, think of it like you're a little ant or something with ink on your feet, and as you're walking over the different planes. But the chin is a little bit too big. It's too robust, and it always is. You always will shrink that down. Usually you'll have a space between the lips, the bottom lip, and the chin. Now, not always. If you have someone with a really full mouth, you might have very little space between there and the chin. But we're going to give a little more space between the chin and the lips. And so we have the basic idea of our Loomis head and or Reilly. So you can actually take Loomis and impose the same Reilly rhythms on them. And again, that'll really help as far as that goes. And again, the reason that we have the Reilly technique is, again, this little rhythm here is to remind us, hey, there's the top of the cheekbone. That's what this guy here is here for. This one here is, oh yeah, there's a mandible, and it comes across the mandible into what's called the jowl. In terms of that fatty area, the bone, it's of course not called that. But then we have, again, here the muzzle. Well, if we get smile lines, the smile lines are going to come from off that arc. Things like that. These other fourths here, those are the wrinkle lines, where your forehead will get wrinkles as they're used more and more and more. As you get older, and they'll stay more and more and more. You're going to get, or if they've got their head scrunched up or something like that, this again is where you're going to see that happening on the head. And sometimes you'll have one more between these two, or you'll have a fold that's, because of the fact it's folding, this is the little bump. And then we get another little bump, and there's a third bump, anyways. So that's what those are for, is to try to indicate you have a little bump, and a little bump, and a little bump, and then sometimes you'll get a furrowed brow and scarring from wrinkling your brow up. If people are really expressive, they'll get that. Of course, it corners of the eyes and stuff like that. So now we've developed this all the way through to, we have our rhythms. We're going to clean this up and actually develop some of the features a little bit more of our Reilly head. All right, so before we go on, I needed to set the record straight a little bit. So I told you how I was bringing this down through here, and again, this is the wider circle. This is almost around where we start some of the masseter muscle, but basically it's the middle part of the face between the jaw and the lips. But I just brought that around like this. Now, the reason I normally do that is I like to nuance some of the stuff right here, but I wanted to clarify for those people that have seen or that understand the planes, this actually is, this changes, this is the front of the chin, then it gets the side of this chin, which is part of the side of the face, and then you'll get a little bit, depending on their age, might jet out again, and then it goes to the side of the face. So there's some nuance in there that I usually like to play with, and so I'll stop it here and then I'll nuance those areas. For the actual simplified side of the head, it comes down and around the cheek and all the way through here till you hit the side of the chin, and so this area right here is also part of the side of that face. And if we wanted to, we could then bring this, you know, this down onto the neck and all, you know, some of the value if we need to. But the idea is that this right here, again, is the planes. That this right here is actually part of that side of the face. So we have, and this is actually usually, unless someone has a really round sort of cheek, this wouldn't be, the cheek would come back a little bit. But I understand this is a simplification. But this right here, this whole thing here is the side of the head, you know, all the way to the chin. So it gets a little wider as it goes through the cheek. But this is the front of the face through here, right? And then this is the side of the head through there, all the way around here. Here through the temple, that's part of the side of the head. You know, as it rounds around the cheek, anything to this side of it would be the side of the head. This would be the front of the cheek, coming down and around the jaw, right to the around the side of the chin. So we have only the front of the chin because you have, you know, the chin has a top, a front, an underside, a right and left side. But I wanted to make sure that we're clear in terms of the planes, that the front does come all the way over here. The reason I stopped it here is, and you'll see a lot of artists sometimes do this, and that's because they want a nuance. This has a lot of transitions here, where this transitions from the side to the front again. Again, sometimes this will bow out, and so you have some subtlety through there that you just want to render. But in terms of the basic plane, all this here is the side of the head. So, you know, up through here, you know, from the chin back, through the jaw, through to the side of that head. All right, so we're going to go ahead and sorry, we're going to progress. That was unintended. We're going to progress to the third step, and but this is the basic of what's going on underneath. We still have to do a decent portrait, and because these are just rhythms. That's the one thing about Reilly. Reilly doesn't guarantee a great portrait. It does help us with symmetry. It does help us with placement. It does remind us of certain landmarks on the skull and certain landmarks on the face. And it does help us with all those wonderful things. But then we still have to, you know, these are just generalized placeholders, the mouth, the nose, the eyes, and we have to turn into something. And so that's what we're going to do for the last step. All right. So we're going to come back for that.